Hello, everyone. Just a quick get into bit of information. I noticed in my last video that I've been messing up on Daniel's voice and changing his accent multiple times. I'm going to fix that in this recording. I will be sticking to one accent. If I don't and you notice it, tough, but I'll try my best. Anyway, let's get this story started. Bea and I moved through the halls quickly, the first aid kit rattling at my side. Bea held the flashlight out in front of us, illuminating the way with little regard for being seen. We didn't have time to worry about that. We came to a crossroads and skidded to a stop. "Which way?" Bea asked. "Shoot, I'm, not sure, I looked off to the right and left hallways. Both were dark and unfamiliar. "We might have made a wrong turn at some point." "Dang it. Should we go back?" "I don't know. That may take longer. One of these might loop around." "Okay then. Which way?" Left." We turned off down the old concrete corridor. The walls were composed of old cracked cinder blocks and rusted lead pipes. Every step we took felt like an explosion erupting down the hallways. My heart jumped with each one. We twisted and weaved through the rooms and doors until finally we emerged into a familiar area. An old vacant-looking office space. Desks sat empty and abandoned behind moldy cubicles, and a couple of fluorescent lights clung to life on the ceiling. They flickered and hummed erratically. Across the way we could see the door back to the safe room where Ethan and Daniel were, waiting. "Good call," Bea told me as she went to continue forward. Tink-tonk, tink-plink, came an echo from the hallway behind us. "Are you fucking kidding me?" Bea muttered desperately. "That thing is still alive?" "But we locked the door. How did it get down here?" We could hear its noise getting closer than it already was, and heading our way. The room was too large and wide. There was no way we would make it across quietly and fast enough. That left only one option. "We have to hide." Bea nodded. We exchanged a nervous glance and then both split away from each other. She stepped into a cubicle close to us, and as I passed by, I could see her sticking herself under one of the desks and out of sight. It would have to enter the cubicle to see her. I stepped up a bit further and entered another workstation, doing the same as the creature from downstairs approached. I could hear it humming to itself, a horrible, inhuman song that had no correlation to the notes it tapped on the xylophone. Blood rushed through my ears, adding ambience to the noise, and a familiar feeling of adrenaline pumped through my body. I heard its heavy hands dragging across the carpet, and suddenly it stopped, just at the entrance of the room. The only sound was that of buzzing lights and excited breathing from the creature. It continued to shuffle, moving through the area, although it wasn't heading for any of the other doors. It was making circles. I could hear it entering the cubicles and pulling open drawers on the desk, rummaging inside, then gently shutting it. My heart began to pound. It was going to check all of them. I slid the first aid kit against the wall, then slowly crawled out from under the desk and crossed the edge of the workspace. As cautiously as I could, I peered around the corner. I could see its bald, skin-patched head just barely peeking above the top of a cubicle. The one right next to Bea. I could tell it was currently hunched over inspecting a drawer when it shut it. The thing braced itself into the walls of the office space and lifted its entire body, vaulting itself into the cubicle on the opposite side. It was going to loop its way to Bear's hiding place. That meant there were 2 desks before it reached her. The instant I saw it hunched over, I stepped out of my spot and began crawling down the aisle towards her. The sound of the creature rummaging masked what little noise my footsteps made, yet it still felt like every one of them was a hammer against stone. I froze as I heard it suddenly make a noise, a slight My body trembled and my legs tensed, prepared to bolt if the need be. However, instead of a squeal, I heard the creature begin humming, accompanied with an awful, wet, squelching sound. After that, it went back to check the rest of the drawer. I didn't even want to know what had just happened. I reached Bear's cubicle and peered inside. She jumped a bit upon seeing me, but covered her mouth in time to stifle her surprise. I held up my hands in reassurance, then pointed to the wall behind her, informing her that the creature was right there. No sooner had I told her that, the drawer had begun to shut. Right as I stood in the open, Bear's eyes filled with concern. I stood into a crouch and willed my legs to take large strides towards her. By some miracle, they managed to remain quiet. I reached her and slid in close just as its hand slapped over the side of our cubicle. With a heavy breath, it climbed into the adorning space. I waited until I heard the drawer open, then nodded to Bear. Together we climbed out and curled our way outside of the office. She went to move further down, but I caught her, nodding back to the one it had already checked. She didn't argue, and together we slipped a cubicle down and slid under the desk together. A moment later, we heard it climb into her space. We sat close to one another, her clinging to me as I clung to her. Despite the extreme danger, I felt safe next to her. The monster continued from space to space, checking the drawers all the while. Eventually, it finished one side and passed to the other half of the room. That's when Bear reminded me of something important. She leaned close, cupping her hands and lips nearly touching my ear, then whispered, "Where's the first aid kit?" I leaned back. "I had to leave it to come to get you." Too loud. She looked nervously at me. "What if it finds it and takes it?" That was a good point. It was getting close to where I had left it, and the thing loved collecting stuff. We desperately needed that kit. That meant we had to get the creature out of the room. I slipped out from under the desk as a drawer opened across the room. Gently, I slid out a cabinet near me, just a crack. Inside was mostly useless junk that the creature had just rustled over. However, I wasn't looking for anything important, just heavy. My hand softly felt around, making sure not to create noise until it came to rest on something metallic. I gripped it and retracted my arm. It was a stapler. Perfect. The thing shut the drawer from its cubicle, and I ducked down just as it hurtled to the next. When it continued its routine, I stood, turned to the doorway we had entered from, and lobbed the stapler as hard as I could. It disappeared into the dark moor, then crashed against the concrete walls with a loud clang. The thing instantly squealed as I ducked back down, then I heard it tumble and clatter over the cubicle walls like a bull. It pounded its instrument and screamed off into the dark as Bear and I jumped up, grabbed the first aid kit and continued forward. Hang in there, Ethan. We're coming, I muttered. Dan swung open the door and pulled us in. Are you two okay? I heard that thing down the halls. It's still alive. Yeah, and we had a bit of a run-in with it, Bear said. Here. She handed him the box of medical supplies. Daniel didn't waste any time. He dashed to Ethan and unpacked the kit. The wound the ballerina had given him was a lot worse than we had initially thought. He withdrew a small bottle of alcohol and stretched Ethan's arm out. All right, kid. Brace yourself. This isn't going to feel good. Should I bite down on something first, or... While Ethan was distracted, Daniel poured the acidic liquid over the wound. Ethan took a sharp gasp and then hollered in pain. Bear stepped behind the couch he sat on and cooed reassurance in his ear. I stood nearby and let him grip my arm in pain. As the liquid cleared away the visage, we could see the dark gash underneath. It had torn deep, nearly to the bone. I prayed that he would be okay. It had been my fault he and Bear had to attack the ballerina in the first place. Bear, tear me open one of those pouches that says antiseptic white, Dan told her. She listened and passed it to him. He wiped at the gash as it continued sweeping blood. All the while Ethan winced and gritted his teeth. I felt horrible for him. I felt even worse when Daniel pulled out a pouch that read sterile needle. He looked at Bear and me. I need you two to hold him steady. There's no easy way to do this. I swallowed and nodded. Bear did the same. Over the next 10 minutes, Daniel threaded the needle back and forth through Ethan's skin, the medical string pulling the wound shut. Ethan strained and struggled in pain, but eventually his body could no longer take it, and he passed out. That made it easier for Daniel. He wrapped the wound, leaned back against the floor, and deeply sighed when he was finished. All right, I think that's all we can do, at least as far as I know. Bear and I nodded. Thank you, Ethan muttered, coming to. Don't talk, kid. Just take it easy. We'll have to change those bandages in an hour. Just rest. He pulled out some saltines and forced Ethan to eat them, then did the same with a bottle of water. After that, Ethan slowly drifted into unconsciousness once again. Bear, Daniel, and I sat silently in the room. It was an old urban basement lounge, complete with a bar, a small guest room, and a bathroom. So far, it was the nicest safe house we had encountered. There was some minor furniture around, such as Ethan's couch and a guest room bed. It was so dirty and damp, none of us dared sleep on it, however. You did incredible, Daniel, Bear told him, breaking the tension. I just did what I knew how to do. Well, you saved him, she spoke. Where did you learn all of that, anyway? Just some skills I picked up. That's cryptic. You an assassin or something? Bear joked. Yeah, real dangerous. Dan smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him do that in a while. I need a minute. I'll be back. He stepped into the dark and dingy bathroom and shut the door, leaving Bear and me in silence. Instantly, we fell into the awkwardness that had been present since our conversation in the ballerina hallway. I still had no idea what to say to her. However, after what had just transpired in the last 24 hours, I felt it was almost necessary to say something. How are you doing? I asked. Huh? Bea murmured as if she hadn't expected me to talk to her. Are you okay? Been a while since we've really talked. Oh, I'm good. Thanks for your help back there in that office. I had no idea what was going on behind me. You don't need to thank me. I know you would have done the same. You really did back at the gym. Thank you for that. What do you mean? I laughed softly. What do I mean? Beer, you dove into a monster's back to save me. Oh, that. I was just doing what any one of us would have done, she said, brushing her hair from her face. Ethan did too. I looked at Ethan, resting on the couch, clutching his arm covered in already blood-soaked bandages. Yeah, he did. I felt guilt flood into me. At the end of the day, my fears had come true. More people had come down here with us and gotten hurt. But the sad truth was, if they hadn't, I wouldn't have made it this far. Bear had been right in what she said. We needed all the help we could get. I wondered how Andy had survived the journey all by herself. I'm sorry for leaving, Bear, I said softly, and I'm sorry for getting so upset when you came. I know you guys just wanted to help, and you were right. Having you here so far has helped a lot. I'm just so afraid to lose you guys. Bear breathed a sigh of relief as the elephant finally left the room. It's okay. You don't need to be sorry. I get why you were upset. I know it doesn't make anything easier with us coming, but Joel, you have to understand that if you had come down here and not come back while we just sat up there and did nothing, Ethan and I wouldn't have been able to forgive ourselves. That's why we followed. We need you, Joel. She scooted closer and then softly added, I need you. I stared solemnly at the floor. What she was saying were feelings I had already felt long ago about Andy when she left. The only difference is that she and Ethan had the courage to do something about it. I grabbed her and pulled her close into a hug. I had missed the feeling. It's okay. I'm right here, and I'm glad you are too. Both of you. I still felt that it was bad for us to travel in such a large group, but it seemed like either way had its pros and cons. If the group before us had set out with a group of 13, I figured that 4 couldn't be too dangerous in comparison. Speaking of the group before, I held Bear for a while longer and then pulled away and stood. I walked over to the bar and she followed. What are you doing? Grabbing something to take off the edge? No, I gotta update the map. Also, I'm looking for another log from the last group down here, the ones that mark the safe rooms. The last note they left saved our lives. I bet they wrote lots of useful stuff down in these places. I did in fact end up finding another log. This one was sitting in a drawer in the guest bedroom side table, written in an old damp notebook. There were really only updates about the fate of the former party. They reached this location with the same 10 they had left the office with. However, there was one note that caught my eye amidst the update. It appears that the curator is sensitive to light. This must be due to its life in the dark halls. It's okay being in lit rooms, but Trent claimed he managed to stun the creature by shining his flashlight in its eyes on the run for food earlier. According to him, it was only enough to barely escape, but it should still be noted as a last resort. The curator. Were they talking about the thing downstairs? I withdrew our own wind-up flashlight and clicked it on, turning it to myself. The old, faded bulbs were barely enough to make me blink, let alone squint. Still, if it came down to it. When Ethan woke up, Daniel informed him that we had to change his bandages. As he did so, we all discussed. So, what's the plan now? Ethan asked.
Well, you lost a lot of blood, so, for the time being, nothing. We're gonna hold out here.
Daniel replied, wrapping the cloth tightly.
What?
No, I'm fine. Let's just keep going.
Look, I appreciate your grit, Ethan. But if we keep moving with you hurt like this, it's not gonna be good. Our hearts are pumping fast, and so is our blood, the latter of which you're in short supply of. If you pass out while we're out here, it's going to cause a lot of problems, not to mention the chance of infection.
Daniel, I'm fine. I don't want to be the reason we aren't moving. You're not, Ethan, Bear told him. I'm sure we're all prepared for stuff like this to happen. Plus, it's clear that the past groups took it slow as well. There's no harm in taking time to get through this. Rushing is how we get hurt.
Ethan sighed,
then winced as Daniel pulled his bandages tightly.
All right, fine. Are you guys sure?
Yeah, man, I told him.
All right, drink this,
Dan said, handing him a bottle he had filled from the sink at the bar. Ethan drank without question, downing the whole thing in nearly 3 gulps. As he did, Daniel turned to us.
If we're gonna be here a bit, we're gonna have to make runs for food.
Yeah, I already thought of that. It might be easier than upstairs, Bear said, trying to ease the tension. Up there, we knew it would only be in one place. Down here, there's so much space, it's a lot easier to hide.
Yeah, yet somehow it keeps finding us,
I groaned.
Speaking of which, why is that thing still here?
Daniel chimed in.
Last we saw, it was surrounded by those raptor girls. I mean, look what they did to Ethan in one swipe. The damn beast should be dead.
Ethan wiped the water from his mouth. Yeah. Well, I also stabbed it in its throat with a spear, and it barely flinched. Something tells me it's not as easy to take down as we hope. Bear pursed her lips in thought. Wait, Joel, you locked the doors around the stairs. Do you think it's locked down here with us? I thought for a moment. It was a valid point, yet something didn't make sense about the creature. I pondered all of its qualities and then came to a conclusion. I don't think so. Think about it. That thing brought us food every week for the past 4 years. To do that, it would have had to go down really far to find new rooms after it looted the top ones. It's taken us over a week to even get this far, and even excluding having to hide, that's about 2 days of total travel.
What are you saying?
Daniel questioned. I'm saying that I think the curator has ways of traveling through this place that we don't know about. The curator? Ethan asked. That's what the last group called the thing from downstairs. Dan snickered.
That's a dumb name for it.
The curator never showed up again for a week. Daniel and Bear went out on a food run during that time and came back unscathed. That was a relief. With them, they brought 6 cans of corn, which was honestly a great find. They also found a decavuna, which was an even better one. We had already played the cards Grace gave us to death and were ready for something new. It was difficult for Ethan to hold them right, as his injured arm couldn't close the hand attached. Instead, he told me which card to play, and I played it for him. One night, Bear lay down beside me and rested her head on my chest. It was such a familiar comfort, though we were so far from home. I kicked myself for even calling it home, but it was true. The 6-round room structure really had become a home in a sense, at least compared to down here. It had been nearly a year since we had arrived, and a basket had just come in. Claire and Jan knocked on the bedroom door, and we opened it. Their faces were beaming. We got a perfect one today. They were right. The thing downstairs had really found the good stuff. A whole unopened box of Twinkies, toothpaste, a lunchbox full of old cassettes, a couple of new games, and many other things. Any electronics in there? Benjamin asked, eagerly peeking his way through the crowd. Hold your horses, Ben, Grace scolded as she sorted through the box. She eventually pulled out an old alarm clock that had been tossed in the bottom. Benjamin inspected it carefully before declaring, "Yes," and walking off into the corner of the room to his belongings, ignoring the rest of the basket. Bear, Ethan, Andy, and I were all curious and followed. What do you need that old thing for, Ben? I asked him. He turned around with a big grin. I've been collecting a whole lot of parts each run. Haven't you noticed? Well, yes, I suppose, but you still haven't told us why. I'm gonna try to build a radio. We looked at him, perplexed by the statement. A radio? Bear asked. You can do that? Oh, sure. I used to be a comms operator in the military, specializing in repairs. Did a lot more then, with a lot less than I have now. Do you think it will let us communicate with outside? Andy asked eagerly. Oh, no, sorry, my dear. Nothing that complex. I just wanted to do it to keep myself occupied. After all, boredom seems to be the slow and silent killer around here. But maybe, at the very least, there will be something interesting we can pick up in this place. That's pretty cool, Ben, Ethan told him. Make sure to keep us updated on the progress. Will do. I rejoined the group as they finished dishing out the remaining contents of the basket. The auction wouldn't become a tradition until a few months later. Afterward, Andy, Bear, Ethan, and I all returned to the game of Sorry we had been playing. As we did so, Bear began chuckling to herself. What's so funny? Asked Ethan. Oh, nothing. It's just, look at us all. Ben starting a passion project. Everyone gets all excited over the basket drops. We're sitting here playing sorry. She looked up to us with a smile. It's like we're all one big family living in a happy home. Ethan and I laughed at her joke. Andy did as well, but it was more somber and died a lot faster. I noticed. It's not funny. Larry suddenly snapped from the living room. He currently lay on the ground, just staring at the ceiling. It's pathetic. We're all just trapped here like mice in a box, waiting for whoever set the trap to come back and throw us all away. Jeez, man, Ethan said. We know it's pretty hopeless, but dwelling on it doesn't help. Maybe if we did, we would actually put our efforts towards doing something about it rather than sitting around doing jack shit.
That's enough, Larry.
Daniel cut him off as he entered the room. He smiled at us, passed us each a Twinkie.
Just enough for all of us.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, don't mention it.
As Dan left, we all got up to put our new treasures in with our stash of belongings. All of us except Andy. She stood and went to the window instead. I stopped in the doorway as Ethan and Bear continued. Bear noticed that I wasn't following and turned back. You coming? I nodded to Andy and made a concerned face. Oh, I see. You want me to? Don't worry. I got it. I smiled. She gave me an unsteady nod as if she was unsure of something, then continued to Ethan. I approached Andy from behind and put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, don't let what Larry said get to you. There's nothing wrong with how we're handling this. We're doing all we can to survive, and that's what matters. Andy gave me a half-hearted smile that dropped as soon as she looked back to the window. Do you think we're ever going to get out of here? The question took me back. Of course, it was something I thought of every day. We all did. But this was the first time anyone dared to bring it up. We all agreed, unspoken, that we were going to get out someday. How was just what we had given up on. Andy, of course we will. There's no way this is it. This isn't the end for us. Okay, yeah. So, what if Larry is right? What do you mean, Andy? What if we aren't doing enough? What if instead of waiting for something to happen, we're supposed to be looking? Looking for what? I don't know. Never mind, forget it. Andy, talk to me. Looking for what? A way out? Yeah, a way out. I stared at her, waiting for her to continue, unsure of how to respond. We're all so afraid of this place that we barely scraped the surface and then gave up on trying. But what if there's more here? What if we need to be working harder? I looked at her with deep concern, then placed my hands on her shoulders and turned to her face. Hey, I'm just as eager to get out of here as you are, I promise. But, Andy, we can't lose anyone else. If we rush into the unknown, that'll end up happening. Now, the second we learn something that might point to a way out, I will be right there with you. But for the time being, I think we need to wait until we know what to do. Otherwise, we'll just be running blindly through the dark. Her eyes gazed into mine with pure emotion, fear, anxiety, passion, confusion. Trust me, I told her. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she was just more upset. Then she surprised me by wrapping her arms around me and pulling me in close. My heartbeat grew faster and louder, even louder than when I had to run for the basket. I held her as she leaned into me. She felt warm and safe, so familiar. Andy had never come back up. The ballerinas had told me. What did that mean? Your heart always beats fast when I lay next to you, Bear muttered in the dark. Do I make you nervous? I can lay alone if you... No, stay, I whispered back as I gripped her tightly, pressure building in my chest as I lingered between memory and reality. Between Andy and Bear, my heart ultimately dropped as memory won out. The second we learn something that might point to a way out, I'll be right there with you. Well, well, well. Hello everyone, Grimm here. I'm thinking of changing up how I do this a little bit. So the next video that I put out in relation to this series is going to have a slight bit of difference to it. Leave a note in the comment if you like it this way or the previous way, and we'll see how we can get on. But anyway, today you are here joining me as we listen to and go through the amazingly terrifying tale, Somewhere Beneath Us, Part 6. As mentioned before, it's written by the amazingly talented Ink Welder. I hope you've enjoyed my recent upload flurry of slushy complete series. It was just something I thought I should get out while I had the mind to do so. It just took a little bit longer, and for some reason I keep having technical difficulties where things get uploaded in the wrong order. I don't know, I'm going to blame Adobe, but it's probably just all me, to be fair. But anyway, I've dragged this outro too long. So, as usual, be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing night or day. And, as always, I've been Grimm. I am Grimm. And I'm signing off.